Greetings everybody, it's Rob from Sage Tower Games, and I'm here talking about some stuff about Pathfinder 2e, specifically Golems. Now, Golems are a creature that I particularly like using. They're a lot of fun. They're these very sturdy construct-like creatures that have some interesting effects to them. However, this video is going to go into a very hot topic, which frankly serves to answer the question, are golems the worst creature really in Pathfinder? Let's discuss. Now, the reason to talk about this is first, let's talk about golems themselves. Golems are usually high AC, usually high health creatures that are usually very powerful. They either have very strong fist attack that can either do some sort of effect on top of that, as well as some sort of breath, conal, pulse attack as well. They have a ton of immunities to most everything because of construct, but the main thing is their golem anti-magic, which is the main topic to discuss about golems. So the way golem anti-magic usually works is that you are immune to all magic effects except certain types. You are either healed by some, harmed by some, or slowed by some. There may be a few out there that have different effects, but those are the basic three, and there's different types that may do it. You know, one may be healed by fire, one may be slowed by cold, and one may be harmed by electric, etc., etc. So there's different types like that. What constitutes triggering this effect? So the first thing to look at is spells like telekinetic projectile. Now, I rule telekinetic projectile as not counting as a magical effect that gets countered by the anti-magic, and that's primarily because the actual object itself isn't magical. You're using the magic to pick up an object and throw it. So in my case, I consider that not being a magical spell that targets the golem itself. Now, of course, because it is technically just physical damage, it would be susceptible to the golem's DR resistance, which usually about 10 to 20 to most physical things. So it will do less damage, but it'll still be an option for those who have that as a spell. However, cantrips are the other option. Cantrips are level 1 spells that can be heightened up, and they automatically, if you have the right element, can trigger whatever the effect is. Now, this leads to instances where the golem's anti-magic actually makes the cantrip better than what it was. You may have a spell that only does maybe 4d6, but because of the golem's ability, it takes, 6d10 or something, because every time you poke it with that element. And now you can just ping cantrips at it, and the cantrips can pretty much destroy a golem rather easily if you can stay away from it in time. And that's one of the topics which isn't debatable, but does kind of make golems a bit weak, in that if you have the elemental coverage, you can pretty much shut down any golem by just staying far away enough and attacking it with spells, cantrips. Don't even have to waste spell slots, and just pummel it down turn by turn until it eventually collapses. The golems usually can't take that many hits from that because it usually does a good chunk of its damage, of its health. So cantrips are usually a very go-to way of defeating golems, which makes you wonder, should these high-level golems, CR 10, 13, 17, be able to be just defeated so easily by cantrips? Is that keeping the encounter, The other thing, and this is probably the biggest topic, or kind of the biggest debate, if you will, are weapon property runes and how those exactly interact. And I admit, I was going back and forth because in the campaign I'm currently playing in, there are quite a bit of golems. And how do property runes? Technically, the rune itself on the weapon is magical, but the weapon itself isn't magical. Does the rune count as hitting the golem with a magical effect? So does this rune that only does 1d6 damage count as triggering what could be 5d10 points of damage from that one rune? I've looked online, and the debates go back and forth either way, depending on how it works. And in my game, I do allow it. So if you have, a fire rune and you attack a flesh golem, it will trigger the harmed by effect, etc., etc. And the reason I think this works is, one, they still have to hit the golem. Golems usually have a high AC, so that means that they have to at least have a decent hit. They can't just blindly shoot at it. Two, if they're using it on a melee weapon and are hitting it, that means that they're pretty close to it. If you're doing the elemental damage that the golem is weak to, it probably will focus you and it'll chunk its damage towards you, so there's a risk in terms of that. And three, the golems have an issue where they go from either being too easy to too hard. What I mean by this is if you don't have the elemental coverage to actually cover the creature's weakness, you may be fighting this thing for a long time, chipping it down slowly because you just can't weaken it. Even if you slow it down, you may be able to run away from it, but you might not be able to actually stop it because you can barely dent it because of how hard it is to hit it and how little damage it takes from normal attacks. Most resistances bypassed by adamantine, and unless your party runs into quite a few golems, they probably don't have an adamantine weapon until they really need one, or they get one through whatever the adventure campaign that you're playing is. Maybe after the first, second time they fight golems and constructs, they'll go pick up an adamantine weapon, but until then, no one really needs it because this is the rare case when you need to bypass hardness or bypass golems' resistances is a very specific case, Without that, your weapons are barely scratching it. Most spells don't have an effect on it. So unless you have this specific element that it's weak to, well, you're going to be in for a tough time. The last kind of other topic for debate are alchemical mixtures or elixirs, acid flasks, alchemist fire, that kind of stuff. And from what I've gathered, a lot of people are saying that these consumables don't actually trigger the effect. And I have to, in my way, agree with it, I think. Because technically, you're not actually making a magical item. You're making, it's a flask of acid, basically. Or you're making a flask of flammable liquid that when it throws, it explodes and it's like a Molotov cocktail, kind of. That's not magic. That's just a little acid bomb. So I think the damage would still go through. I have no problem with the damage for the flask actually hitting. But I don't think it would trigger the magical effect from the anti-magic, because again, it's not a magical item in that regard. With all that, let's discuss, kind of sum it up all together into one nice succinct message. Are golems the worst creature in Pathfinder? So, what are the pros for golems? They usually have high health, they usually have a high AC, anti-magic, and resistances, and can do a ton of damage. What are the weaknesses for golems? They are usually weak to certain elements. The anti-magic can actually make weaker spells stronger than higher level spells, and are weak to property runes if you allow it. Since most people probably have some sort of property rune, or if you have a spellcaster, they probably have cantrips, either electric arc or rare frost or acid splash. Those three give you acid, cold, and electric. That's three different elements. One of those is going to do something to the golem, most likely. Either slow it or damage it, in most cases. That you just need someone with a flaming rune, basically, and you cover the four main elements. At that point, you can just start chunking through golems. So, as much as I think golems are a lot of fun to play, and I like using golems, that I just feel like the encounters usually let me down in the long run. They usually aren't that strong. They're strong until the party figures out the weakness, and then they just become tissue paper. They can just be slashed through and crushed, no problem. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys use golems in your game? Have you played in the game and fought a golem in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Did you think it was easy? Did you think it was hard? Let me know out in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe if you like to see some more Pathfinder 2e content. Thank you guys.